All right, y'all. Welcome to Resting Places, Learning Spaces, the podcast where we explore cemeteries, memorial spaces, and more, and the lessons they hold for history, memory, and education. I'm Dr. Hilary Van Dyke, and today we're on location. Actually, I'm leading a camping trip this weekend, and one of the folks that I was interviewing for this episode is on the camping trip, so I decided that we would just record on set, on location, out in the field, here in Ocala National Forest at Alexander Springs. And today we're expanding how we think about resting places by exploring Roman ruins around the world. I'll be focusing on my visits to Roman ruins in Bath in England and Volubilis in Morocco, both of which I visited in 2025. My guest today will be my friend Remy, who was with me in Morocco to talk through that experience. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, educational contributor Michelle Anderson. In researching for this episode, I realized that humans are the only creatures who are into their history, or as British antiquarian William Camden said, we have a back-looking curiosity. One particular looking back curiosity is that of the Roman Empire. That's not surprising considering the influence of the Roman Empire still present in law, literature, language, technology, science, art, and architecture. In 2023, there was a TikTok trend of women asking the men in their lives how often they think about the Roman Empire, which started a conversation about the fact that men think about the Roman Empire a lot. In a Time magazine interview, Mary Beard, author of Emperor of Rome ruling the ancient Roman world, posits that, quote, ancient Rome is kind of a safe place for macho fantasies. In her interview, she reminded listeners that the Roman Empire wasn't just about generals and posh white men. It was an empire built on slavery and violence, and a lot of emperors not doing much but putting up statues of themselves. In 2025, I saw 2 sites of Roman ruins. The first was in Bath, England. Romans arrived in AD 43. In AD 60, the Romans turned the natural springs into sacred baths by placing oak piles deep into the mud and using lead pipes to direct the water. The baths were considered sacred, and the water still flows through there today. In Bath, the Romans built the Temple of Sulis Minerva and the modern city of Bath. Late in the 19th century, English archaeologists rediscovered the baths. When I went to Bath, it was on a bus tour to both Bath and Stonehenge, and we talked about Stonehenge during first season. When we got to Bath, we got to wander the town a little bit because the town is a World Heritage Site, which it got that designation in 1987. It was really rainy that day, but it was still pretty cool to see how intact the place still was. The second Roman ruins I went to was Volubilis, which I don't think I'm saying right, in Morocco. And there, the Romans started a small settlement more than 2,000 years ago. Over time, it grew into an important city of the Roman Empire. At its peak, the city had large public buildings, beautiful homes, colorful mosaics, and strong walls built to protect the people who lived there. Many of the Roman ruins there are still standing today, which helps historians understand what life was like a long time ago. What makes Volubilis especially interesting is the site shows evidence of many different groups of people who lived there over the years, from early communities to the Roman leaders and later Islamic leaders. And for a time, it served as the capital of a new Islamic dynasty founded by Idris I, whose tomb is located nearby. Because the city was eventually abandoned and left mostly untouched for centuries, much of it remains well preserved. The differences reveal how the empire is remembered, and particularly who controls the narrative long after the empire is gone. All right, so here we are for episode 2. Now that I've got video as a part of the pod, can't tell me how to act because we're out here at Ocala National Forest at Alexander Springs, laying on some hammocks by the waterfront, and I have my guest for episode 2, Remy Thompson. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Pretty good now that I'm, here in a hammock.
Right on.
So episode 2 for Resting Places, Learning Spaces is focused on Roman ruins. And I've invited you as a guest because we got to experience some Roman ruins together last year in Morocco. So was that your first time doing Roman ruins?
As far as I know, I feel like as long as I've been alive, I had to have been to some other ruins at some point, but
Roman ones?
Probably not.
Okay,
I've never been to like Italy or anything like that.
gotcha.
And I don't know how far the Roman Empire stretched.
I think that was my third time because I've been to them in Rome and then England and then that. I think that was it, maybe though. So, when you first arrived and saw the ruins spread across the landscape, what was your reaction?
It was surreal. So like obviously they occupied some territory and just started building some things, and that's just part of what they, would do or whatever. So it was just surreal. It was very
Yeah.
surreal, especially like when we first got there. So we ate, and then you could just see it in the distance. And that's when, you first started taking your pictures and then going over there, like getting to explore. It was pretty cool.
I agree. I think it was, I would say surreal, particularly because of how big it was
Mm,
and how much of it was still like standing and pretty well intact, especially that giant arch thingy.
right.
'Cause that didn't look like it had gotten damaged ever.
Yeah.
Was there a particular moment or location at the site that has stayed with you the most since we visited?
Definitely that arch you mentioned, just because it was probably the best spot for the pictures. I got like a really good photo under it. And then outside of that, the toilets
Oh, yeah.
stuck with me a little bit just because, I think not that I obsess over, but I think about it sometimes, like how humans have handled that predicament over time. And
Yeah.
then, I think of like olden times and I think of like outhouses, but these people had like toilets, some
Toilets
kind of
with
old school toilet.
pipes and running water.
Right. So like they were ahead of the game as far as that was concerned, obviously because they were rich.
The guide was talking about how they use lead in the pipes.
Hmm.
So I thought that was interesting that their running water for their showers, for baths, toilet, drinking water, all had lead in it.
Well, somebody had to be the guinea pig for them.
The lead poisoning guinea pigs.
Yeah, and karma.
Well, there is that. There is that. How did walking through the ruins feel different from, let's say, like back in the day when we were learning about Romans in history books?
So when you learn about it in history, you think of it from like that as if like you're experiencing it during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing what's left of what it was supposed to be or what they had built is is
We're doing
interesting.
an interview for my podcast.
And now we gotta edit this part out.
Well, maybe. All right. Yeah, I think for me, Greek stuff and Roman stuff when I was a kid, I was super interested in.
Hmm.
So it was really cool to see it. And then the other thing I was thinking a lot about is the fact that it's all still intact in that way.
Yeah.
And I always, when I'm walking through stuff like that, I'm like, okay, 1,000 years from now, what are the ruins they're going to be walking through that are, somehow related to me and the existence I have?
Right.
And then I also am like, do we even build stuff like that anymore?
I mean, I
That it
guess
would be standing for so long.
right. I guess especially not with that, that type of material that
Right.
it would last. How old is it? Do you know?
More than 2,000 years ago. So anything surprise you about the size, condition, or atmosphere of the site?
So I don't know anything about Rome outside of like, I know the Roman Empire was like conquering stuff, just places and just saying this is ours now.
Right.
So when something like that happens, I would assume that like once that's over, whoever was there, would get rid of all of that stuff,
Right.
just tear it all down, which could have happened. Obviously, it's not perfectly intact, but that would be what I would wonder is like what was the aftermath,
Yeah.
because you can't necessarily see that. So I think about like you remember Game of Thrones, Harrenhal, what that
Yeah.
looked like, how that's like the ruins of dragons coming through and tearing that
Right.
up. So it makes you wonder like what kind of stuff happened after that, was them trying to get rid of this, or if they even tried, or if they were like, well, we just won't live here anymore, we'll just be somewhere else.
I do know that it served as a capital of a new Islamic dynasty founded by Idris the First, but I wasn't clear on if
Idris of House Elba. No, I'm just kidding.
I wasn't clear on if they were living in that community or they're just like in the area, but my guess would be that to some extent they were using all of that stuff too. Were there any emotions that came up for you while exploring the site?
I found it interesting. I guess I don't know if that's an emotion. I just found it interesting. So once you get past the idea of like, okay, well, this is conquest, you just kind of look at the art of it
Mhm.
and, and what it is that they were capable of,
Yeah.
because a lot of people think about like Egypt, you know, when you think about Egypt and the kind of stuff that they built and then what's left of what they built. So then Rome, I think, kind of has that same thing, except, you know, they were going around conquering territories and stuff like that. But when you see what's left behind, you know, it makes you think about, I wonder what this looked like at the time. And, you know, it's like how we get the latest iPhone or the latest technology now. Like they were like doing the future stuff, you know,
Right.
We got all the latest artists to, you know, hook all this stuff up and make this look nice. So then when you see it in the vein that we're seeing it like old and it still looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty cool, you know?
I feel like I'm always super grateful when I can experience stuff like that. But then at the same time, it is kind of this awkward feeling because you are just walking through the landscape of conquerors. And particularly that they're like in North Africa. It never even occurred to me before setting up that tour that there were Roman ruins in Africa, which of course they were everywhere.
Right.
So I guess it shouldn't be that surprising. And especially that part of Africa is so close to Europe that it wouldn't necessarily be that difficult for them to get over there. But grateful, fascinating, but then also like there's some other conflicting emotion that I can't necessarily name because you're like also looking at it like, what was with these people that they were so obsessed with taking over everything?
You feel like you can, you just do it.
Yeah, and they could, so they did.
I mean, because look at humans in general. What we do just in general.
Yeah.
You know, we in nature in hammocks.
Yeah, that's true.
What these
there's
crows gonna do?
pavilions right here. There's all these sidewalks.
Yeah.
So yeah, very true. Humans just we're here camping this weekend.
Yeah.
So we built all these roads through this nature specifically for humans to come and just keep conquering land every weekend or every day, really. But yeah, you're right. Look, we're low-key conquering too.
Human nature is conquest.
And there's people in the springs right now snorkeling with wetsuits on. So
and the fish are like, get out of here.
Yeah, the fish and the gators
are
like,
doing?
bro, this is my house.
Really quick, I want to ask you. So you said you saw 2 other Roman ruins. So what was like the scale of what you saw here versus what you saw in the other places?
So the first place I saw Roman ruins was in Rome.
Of course.
So the Colosseum and all that stuff. So obviously that doesn't compare at all.
For sure.
Like at all. But then I would say this was the second largest one I saw because then the other one I saw was the Roman baths in Bath, England. And it was just literally the only thing that was there was this bathhouse that basically was kind of almost, I would say, what we consider like a fancy upscale gym. Is what that was. And actually, that's the other thing I thought a lot about because even when we were doing the tour through the ruins in Morocco, he's like, oh, this is the bathroom. Oh, this is the living room. These were a bunch of stores. So much about how that town was laid out is how we lay towns out still. So I was interested in that, curious about how much of the way they design townships in Rome, how much did that influence how everybody designs townships now. But then even the bathhouse in Bath, it had like the spa, it had a gym, there's places you could basically go do what essentially seemed like yoga. Right. So then I was like, well, how much of that influence, gym culture here now? I, at the very least, was looking at how much in common we still had with the Romans, but I didn't do much like kind of investigating into how much of that actually literally influences what we do now, or if there's a step even before them that influence how they do the work that is just kind of like that through line, or is it just human nature to just create communities where, okay, we've got the place to live, we've got the stores, we've got the place to go be healthy. All the ruins super interesting. These, I would say, the other thing that was super interesting was how intact a lot of the colors of the murals were.
Right.
And I think for me, the only thing that reminded me of that was in Egypt, in the Valley of the Pharaohs. Some of the tombs, when you're down in there, still have bright colors with all the hieroglyphics.
You remember what the tour guide said about the whole all roads lead to Rome thing? Like, I remember there was like this long road leading to that arch that we saw, and it was like, it went through everything.
Right.
They said it led to even somewhere else or something. I don't remember the details.
Well, let's Google it. Okay, so all roads lead to Rome originated as a 12th century medieval proverb written by Alain de Lille in 1175, likely referencing the vast interconnected 400,000 kilometer Roman road network. The phrase symbolizes that there are many ways to reach the same goal rooted in the historical reality, where all roads diverge from the golden milestone in Rome. So it was that set of roads there, it's particularly the one that went through the middle of it, was somehow connected also to Rome, but obviously there's a body of water.
Right.
So it couldn't be literally, but maybe directionally.
Or at least
still leading to
a
Rome.
a port owned by Rome.
Right. Did you experience anything that challenged your belief about history, empire, or global connections?
Not necessarily, but in asking the question, I do wonder, like, how far did Rome go as far as conquest is concerned? Because you just mentioned that there's a body of water in place, and then obviously they got their army to the point where they were like, okay, well, now we can do whatever we want. Like,
Right.
we have the best technology, we got the best military. It just makes me think about that. Like, what is it about acquiring a certain amount of power that makes you feel like everything should be under your umbrella
Right.
of what you're doing, as opposed to, what else is just already out there?
Any kind of last thoughts about your experience or the tour or the power of being in the space while learning about it?
So there was a tree that we saw it like walking up, and then we saw it at the very end, and we walked past it, and it kind of like, it's one of the first things you see that doesn't look like, I guess, anything else. So it stood out a lot to me, and I wondered a lot about that. And we asked questions about it to the guide. I just don't remember what they said.
The only thing I really remember is the cypress tree of some kind. And he said that that specific type of tree is one that generally is found around Roman ruins because it's a tree from Rome.
Yeah.
When we were looking it up, it says it can be, so the scientific name is Cypressus sempervirens, also commonly known as an Italian cypress, Mediterranean cypress, Tuscan cypress, or Persian cypress. But then your Google Photos thing was saying Moroccan cypress. But either way, cypress trees are indicative of Rome for whatever
It's
reason.
like their little calling card that we took this place.
Yeah. I think my last takeaway is I just always am fascinated by humans and decision making and how similar different cycles of humans are, that this common thread of just I don't know what it is, the urge to constantly just like go and conquer and take over. And then I think also, why is it always subjugation versus cooperation? So I'm just always fascinated by that aspect of humanity.
I mean, if you think about it, that sense of morality is definitely a very human thing.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily in our nature.
Hello, Michelle. Welcome to the pod.
Hello, Hillary. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Living the dream.
As you should be.
All right. So you heard the conversation Remy and I had about the Roman ruins. I really didn't get past just thinking about the fact, like I kind of got stuck on, oh, but we can't bring the students. So what do we do?
Right.
So I think I'm just going to ask you.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Well, yeah. So we typically don't take students to go see the ruins of the ancient civilizations that they study. So the ways we typically handle that is through lots of multimedia type situations. So whether it's video and sort of documentary style footage, or it's just images of what people have taken around the world. One of my favorites actually is 360cities.net, which is crowdsourced. So people take panoramic views of the different places that they are in the world so that other people get to enjoy them. You do, as a teacher, have to be careful that you preview them because sometimes the people in the background are being adults,
yes,
but acting like children.
Yeah, I think we have referenced this
I think
before.
so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was pulling it up, but I'm like, yeah, I remember. What other thoughts were you having when you were listening to our conversation?
Yeah, so I really was thinking about first the idea of that we're not able to be in that space in the way that it was when the people were alive.
Right.
And so how that does change how you're seeing it, right? So it's falling apart. It looks like there's not much there.
Right.
And so you have to use your imagination a lot
Yeah.
to be able to put yourself in that space. And there are also lots of, for, really famous ancient civilization sites where people have put together 3D model versions of what it looked like and have even put in AI people so that you
Right.
can sort of see what it might have looked like. Part of it is just being able to use your imagination and try to recreate that space
Right.
in your head so that you're not sort of taken out of the learning by the fact that you're looking at a pile of rocks.
Right.
So that's part of it. And that can be, a great conversation in a classroom on how to be creative in your imagining of things. And we ask students to do that when they're reading literature too.
Right.
Being able to have that movie going on in your head while you're reading a story helps them really dive into it and become engaged with it. So the other thing I really keyed in on was your statement that you realize that humans are the only creatures who are into their history, or as the British antiquarian William Camden calls it, back-looking curiosity.
Right.
And I think that's useful to engage in that kind of thinking, because we do always want to make sense out of how we are here.
Right.
And that is partly figuring out how we got to be here from where we were.
Right.
But it can be very, very difficult, especially with younger kids in a world history classroom, to get them to have any kind of interest in something that's older than they are.
Right.
So yes, I think we do have that curiosity, but we do in the classroom sometimes have to help kids build that.
Right.
And so that is, again, where the place-based education is really valuable.
Right.
Because it helps kids have more of an interest and make relevance out of it. But then still tie it to, okay, but I'm looking at a picture of rocks. So all to say, bringing that all together, is we do what we can to try to help kids have that image of what things look like, because that can help build the engagement, because otherwise they just might not have it at all.
Yeah.
And then they're just learning dates, which are not very helpful.
I feel like too, with the Roman baths were pretty well intact, and then they did the kind of the recreations of what they thought some of the places looked like. And then in Volobulus, it really was very well preserved.
Yeah.
Sort of, right? Like the mosaics on the ground, that huge archway. There was a lot of stuff that you could still see the evidence of what it was, but then at the same time, it was a lot of like rocks. I guess then the question is, does it become maybe more about the people and less about
the place?
And
I think that's where it really comes into your whole project, in spaces where things are absent. Because that is sometimes when you want to go see a place where something happened and it's been built over, or it's now a parking lot, or So I think it dovetails nicely into your larger project. But that is part of the conversation of we know the importance of what happened where, and how where things happen is a factor of its geography. Yeah.
So my wondering is, do you then just focus on the people and the stories of like Romans?
Right. Yes. I think then you have to, it takes a multifaceted approach, which hopefully we're doing anyway. We just sort of are doing naturally because it makes sense to us, is usually how it happens. But so I think it's the combination of trying to give them resources that can help them picture it in the way that it would have looked if they could walk those streets today. But in the absence of those, so in some cases they are wonderfully intact, but you can't go there. And other cases it is completely built over and it's no longer even a site. But we have some wonderful work that people have done with AI to help us see what it looked like in the time period, or maybe it's none of those things. And so it is about having a multifaceted approach where we're trying to see it, but we're also learning about why we're studying it in the first place, and the stories that come out of it and learning that comes out of that.
Do you know off the top of your head what students are learning world history related to this?
Yes. So students are studying the big world civilizations, and in an intercontinental approach. The only continents that they're not really studying in ancient history is Antarctica, of course, but also Australia. And so the Aboriginal cultures there are not part of our benchmarks, but otherwise we start with Mesopotamia and the cradle of civilization. In terms of civilizations, we do start with prehistory, but we go from Mesopotamia into ancient Egypt, and then we go around the world. And so we have ancient and classical China, ancient and classical India. For Mesoamerica, in middle school, we start with the Zapotec, the Chavin, and the Olmec. It's in high school where they'll learn more of the cultures that were there nearer to European colonization. But we do then also go back to the Mediterranean world and do Greece and Rome and the Phoenicians. And with Rome, they are studying the Republic, and then they are studying the Empire, and then the spread of Christianity and the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I think one of the things too that also was surprising, because I feel like I, from probably middle school, developed interest in like ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, but I don't think I understood the vastness of the Roman Empire. So particularly the fact that I was in Africa looking at Roman ruins, I was like, that set of ruins is interesting because it also helps you understand how much conquering they were out here doing.
And one of the things I find intensely interesting about the Romans is that they did start so small, but it was their worldview that turned them into the empire that wanted to conquer the world and did a really good job of conquering the most of it that they could before they imploded. And that story, I think, of the mindset that they had to have that drive is what is part of the story in their ruins, because they are all over the place. But the fact that even though they're all over the place, there are such commonalities between them, because it was that driving culture that even though they were a civilization that as they conquered, they allowed people to keep some of their culture and some of their, all of those things to just bring them in. But then there were other things that totally like, you're not doing that anymore. We're building these things and this is how life is lived.
Anything else? Did you have any other thoughts about the ruins, the conversation, the implications for the class?
I think part of the conversation when we study Rome and understanding how different they are is trying to make that really clear for students, because we try to understand the past in the terms of what our lens is, what our experiences are. And the Romans truly were so different. Those ancient civilizations were so different. In our country today, it is very difficult to get beyond the lens of Western civilization, which is post-Christian Western civilization, to try to understand parts of the world that didn't have that at all. And to try to understand that there are different ways of thinking and living and understanding how humans work together or don't work together. And that is very challenging, especially if kids are young, because it's all they know. But just we're just trying to start to open their minds a little bit to have those conversations and start to think those things to build their knowledge base, their background knowledge, but also to just expand their thinking.
Okay. I feel like I was just a super nerdy middle schooler, so it makes sense. I was like, oh my gosh.
So if the question is, and should be, how detailed do we get in our teaching of Roman culture? It is, of course, in the mindset of we're working with 11-year-olds. And so there's only so much depth we can get into.
It's hard to get into the...
Right. So the Romans were extraordinarily violent people. So were the Greeks. So were the all of those ancient civilizations. It was kill or be killed. It was conquer as much as you can conquer. And, we do study the Mongols too. And the atrocities that have been committed in history are numerous and they are global. And so that is part of our human story too.
Humans.
Yes.
Like, what is that?
I don't know. I'm glad we don't live in that civilization today, but it is another thing that makes it hard for kids to understand ancient civilizations.
Yeah.
When they have, for the most part, safety and security in their community.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we'll say for the most part.
For the most part.
Well, we're not gonna get into all that.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's interesting too is the obsession that people still have.
Mm,
I wonder if some of it really is because I don't feel like I came out of my lessons thinking that way about
Right.
Egyptians or Romans.
yeah.
That's really been more understandings I've developed as an adult when I've
Mhm.
learned more.
Mhm. And some of that is
Yeah.
age appropriateness,
Yeah.
but you're right. Do we glorify them?
Yeah.
I
It's
think
there's a lot of
we do.
reverence
Mhm.
that ignores some of the, the more gruesome aspects of it. Even just, the fact that I've been on 2 different continents
Yeah.
intentionally seeking out this sort of tourism. Fascinating. But
Mhm.
yeah, Romans.
So their
Not lead
violence
poisoning.
was legendary too.
Yeah.
It doesn't overshadow, I think, the amazing accomplishments
Mhm.
that they pass down, and I think sometimes that wonder about the past, or that sense of like everybody needs to know about the Romans
Mhm.
and how amazing they were, is just because of that legacy.
Right.
And so you have to take the good with the bad, and as adults we can have those conversations. So
Mhm.
we just can't always have with kids.
And so much of society has been influenced by it that like you do have to learn about it.
Right.
Yeah. But then is there like a circling back that happens in high school?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No, because the march of time
Yeah.
continues on, and they have to get through to today in high school.
So then you just hope that they do
Well,
it again or
yeah.
something in college.
Well, so I do feel though that this is a great place as kids get older and become adults, that the movie industry actually has been really helpful with. Yeah, so those movies like 300 and Gladiator. In fact, there are historians that really do appreciate movies like The Gladiator, even though the history isn't great.
Right.
The feeling that you get from
Right.
watching that spectacle is getting us kind of to a place where the Romans might have.
Understand. All right, that wraps up this episode of Resting Places Learning Spaces. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with fellow educators, travelers, or anyone interested in the intersection of history and place. You can follow me on Instagram at Professor Van Dyke to continue the conversation or recommend a topic. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, every resting place has a story to tell.